to Jake's RC stuff, and today we're not doing a full build video on this because I've sort of stumbled into immediately a problem when I started sort of getting bits out to do a video on it. So I need to order a couple of bits, and while we wait for that, obviously there's not a massive amount that we can do, but some decisions have been made. So I've decided, after a lot of debate between iNav and ArduPilot for the VTOL, I am going to be doing ArduPilot. And the reason why is kind of simple, really. iNav's is half-baked. And I know I use iNav quite a lot, but I'm not the biggest fan of iNav. It's the best that we've got right now, but there are a lot of issues with it. You know, and I'm going to try ArduPilot. A lot of people probably say it's a bad idea for a VTOL plane to be your first ArduPilot build, but luckily I'm using pretty much all the same kit as Painless 360, so hopefully his sort of build how-to video can get me set in the right direction. Now, again, with iNav, yes, I'm more familiar with it, but the way that you transition between quad mode and plane mode, if you like, is that you basically have a switch that one way is plane mode, one main is quad mode, and sort of in the middle, it's basically quad mode, but the motors tilt 45 degrees forward to build up speed, and then you manually flick it. So when you're transitioning between modes, let's say you're hovering and you want to go to plane, you flick it into the middle, the plane will start moving forward just because the motors are tilted forward. There's nothing that fancy going on, and then you have to flick the switch the rest of the way to go the rest of the way and go into plane. And the same backwards. Basically, you've got to get the plane right on the edge of a stall, flick it once to sort of help you slow it down even more, because it'll have, you know, a bit of up motors to keep it flying, and then you flick it all the way. It just seems a bit naff. It really does feel like someone, I want VTOL and iNav, and cobbled it together. ArduPlane, on the other hand, does actually sort of blend the two together more seamlessly. I'm not sure how much logic there is in that, or whether it's just, I mean, it may be as simple as, instead of the motor snapping to 45 and then to full, it just does a slow motion, you know, a slowed down soft movement between the two. I don't know, but ArduPlane looks a lot better. I've had a look at the videos. It doesn't look that hard to program, so even though I haven't done it before, I've decided we're going to give it a go. Now, in terms of the parts that are missing, obviously we have our main flight controller, which I'll put roughly somewhere in the safety frame. And there's a number of things that are going to get plugged into this, obviously, to make it work. Numero uno is our crossfire receiver, which, if you haven't seen one of them before, essentially has 4 wires coming out of it. You've got power, or positive, negative, and you've got input and output, so that obviously input from the receiver to your flight controller, this is for crossfire, is for your radio signals and stuff, and then going backwards is so that you can see your GPS coordinates, for example, on your radio. So if the model gets lost, you still have its last GPS coordinates on your radio, and you can use Google Maps or whatever to try and find it. So that's fine. A lot of the stuff before I got into iNav, I've used 3 cables. It was positive, negative, and signal. So, you know, video transmitters, positive video signal, cameras, all of that stuff. GPSs were the only thing that used 4 wires, and a lot of the ones we could cut and change wires to sort of extend it. But as more and more stuff started using 4 pins, because it had transmitter and receiver instead of just signal, I bought from the Pi Hut these 4-pin 0.1 inch connectors. As you can probably guess from the name, designed for Raspberry Pis. You get these little 10cm cables, and what's great is you cut them in half and you basically have 2 sockets, 4-pin sockets to fit onto these pins. Now, either I've lost what I've got left or I ran out. I can't remember. I think I was very close to running out. So if I've lost them, I've lost like 1 cable, or I've run out and I need to buy some more. So I've been on the Pi Hut. They're a few pence each. So, you know, buy 4 of them, you've got 8 connections essentially. Except there is one slight difference with this model. So again, we've got Walk Snail. This is the Nano, the HD Nano Kit V3, and that'll use 4 again, transmit and receive, power and negative, and the GPS, which is usually the same thing, positive, negative, transmit and receive, because GPS does work both ways. But what you may notice is this GPS has 6 wires. The wires are, so you've got positive, negative, you've got GPS transmit, GPS receive, and you've got compass transmit and receive. And this is very important for this type of model. It really does need a compass. It doesn't need an airspeed sensor, or a proper one. So that may end up being transplanted, if I couldn't be bothered, onto the White Shark. The White Shark, yeah, considering more and more about a HD upgrade and getting that airspeed sensor on there, but that's a little bit down the road. So that's fine, but the problem is we don't have any 4-port connectors, and this actually needs 6. So I went on the Pi Hut and I thought, I wonder if they do 6 ones, and they don't. They do 8 ones. So I'm going to get some 8 ones. You can always cut them down with a knife. The other thing that I could possibly do is do 2 lots of 3, you know, just normal servo plugs, but then that just sort of have power, you know, positive, negative, 1 GPS, and then the other GPS, the 2 compasses on another, which seems a little bit strange. What I may do with that is either have a 4 for all the signals and have 1 separate for power, or more than likely I would have the compass separate. And the idea being that if I use this equipment in another model where the compass isn't really needed for for fixed wing, it's only really needed for quads, I can get rid of that wire and it's out the way and it's done and it's already soldered. I haven't quite sorted it. To also, if I'm ordering, I might as well chuck in a few of those 8-pin ones. I'm sure they'll come in handy at some point, especially if you've got, say, the GPS and the receiver heading in the same direction, which you shouldn't really do. So yeah, the other thing that I just need to work out is exactly where the GPS is going. So in Payments 360's videos, he does put it up here, but there is a bit of a sort of a tail waggle like this going on in his videos that he said might be to do with the power going to the rear motor going past the GPS wires. So I need to see if in its final form he keeps the GPS where it is or if he moves it. I also need to check where he puts the TBS crossfire. The walk cell stuff pretty much has to go in the front because of the length of the wire. So the other 2 stuff is a little bit hit and miss. The other thing that I need to know, because I generally don't know, and it seems to be like rocking horse shit trying to find out what I need, is what battery goes in this thing. I know it's 4S, but I don't know really what size. Probably quite a high C rating, because there'll be a lot of quite high bursts, you know, between the 2 modes. But yeah, flight controller is out again. Now this stuff, I'm going to start sort of packing it to the side a little bit, and I'll get that stuff ordered off the Pi Hut. Not sponsored by them or anything, just where I've bought stuff from before, and they've always been quite quick. So if I order it first class, it should be fine. And also, if I order it Royal Mail, it should, fingers crossed even, go through the letterbox, because I won't be here. Unless I choose... Yes, I can go to the address, I'm not going to mistake that. But anyway, so that is that. While I went to go and find this, because this is now unable to fit in a box, it did get sort of cast into the shed as soon as I stopped working on it, which is the way things seem to go. While I was searching for that, I actually found some remnants of a previous plane. Some of you may be able to recognise it, even if you've been on the channel for a while, or if you just know your flying wings. This other one may help you a bit more. This is the S800, which lasted a flight. Yes, my understanding is I lost a video on this. I had to go back and watch one of my sort of like talking about going flying videos to find out what happened with this. This lost video, and I, while trying to get the goggles off and see where it was, I do loops. I still do occasionally do loops to sort of try to keep it in the same spot, because you don't want to keep it just flying off in a direction. It turns out that I wasn't flying level at the time, and what I basically did was do some sort of weird flat spin into the ground, which also sounds like either my movements were too high on the control surfaces, or the battery was too tail heavy, although from what I can see inside, the battery must have been as far forward really as it could go. So the S800, if you don't know, is a Sonic model. It's one of their first ones. I also had the 1100, which is the bigger one, which you could either have a single bigger motor or you could have two of these motors. But I flew for about 5 seconds. With that one, the second motor died and it cartwheeled. It's crashed. It's been put back together, ready to fly again, but just hasn't been yet. This one I've decided is never good to go back together. This one is going in the bin. I've just got too many models this sort of size, and you know, if it's sat on the shelf and I've had no feeling of wanting to put it back together, that sort of says a lot. You know, if I want to fly a small wing, I've got the little Wing Z84 thing that flies brilliantly, absolutely fantastic. So this was bought basically as something that I could scream around with. It does have a hotter motor on it than what would happen standard. Sorry, I've not been very well. I have an ear infection. It gives me like fluey cold symptoms occasionally, which I'm trying to fight for at the minute. So yes, this could go together. I mean, if I can literally do that, and it's back together. I don't know necessarily where all the canopy is and like it lost the fin and stuff. It hit a rock sort of sticking out the ground, which is why it's done this much damage. They are known for being quite robust. I think this just was a bit unlucky and it hit the rock. You can sort of see by the deformation in the foam here. But yeah, it was during a time when I was buying stuff that I liked and what seemed popular more than what I really wanted. Maybe necessarily not as much the case with this, because as I say, I am someone that likes, you know, flying around at a stupid fast mile an hour, and trying not to hit things while getting close to them as possible. So it should have been an ideal model for that. But I think I was also disheartened by quite how mangled it got on one sort of incident. And yeah, I think another problem I had with this, so it was in this wing, was where the video transmitter was. At the minute, it's just got that servo wire going in there. It was a normal sort of one of your cheapo Banggood video transmitters with a 90-degree bend on for the SMA, then onto a normal antenna. I think that was probably the weak link in the video, because I filmed on the same day the Micro Sky Hunter. Again, this is according to me from the past, and it was all right. The video signal was fine and stuff, but that would have been an antenna directly onto the transmitter, stuck well up out the way, whereas this was, you know, buried in the wing with this 90-degree thing on. If it wasn't fully tight or something like that, if it had been knocked about in transit, then yeah, not particularly good. So in terms of useful kit out of this, obviously we've got all the carbon tubes, if I can be bothered to get them out. There's a chance that we've got a couple of good Savox servos. What are they? 5.5s, I think. This will be the one to see if I'm going to read it. 5.5. So yeah, they basically did 5.5, 5.6 and 5.7 at the end of their model number, and basically the lower number, it was slightly slower speed but tougher, and you went to the 5.7, it was not as strong but was a lot quicker, so it was good for like tail servos in helicopters. So for this, clearly not the fastest model in the world, you know, it's not a fun jet, and you know, it's kind of built to be smacked into stuff. Going for the extra strength servos was the better idea. And as far as I can tell, they have survived. We're just to try and get that out. One of the things that I didn't like about this model that I can remember was the fact that the way all of these hatches and stuff are held in are with a little brass insert into the foam, and they appear to have just been melted in and that's it. And that's fine with 3D printed stuff, or even maybe different foams, but the problem with this is that they came out really easily, and you can see that one there is gone. So yeah, it's not great for that. Also, this covering didn't like staying on, so yes, getting rid of one here means that we'll have more room in the shed to possibly matter stuff in the future. And I am kind of looking at the models that I've got and sort of scrapping stuff off that either I'm never going to fly, or I have a lot of stuff that's similar but better. Like as I say for this, maybe not for screaming around. I kind of don't do that necessarily as much anymore. I still sort of do sort of the obstacle ones, but they're usually at a bit of a slower speed than something like an AXN or something along those lines. So it is normally really good foam on these planes, but as I was clearly not very lucky. So there's our first bit. Just trying to get to this servo and see if I can get it out without knackering the wire. That's the problem when you glue them in like this. The wire usually ends up being sacrificed a little bit. I might keep some of these carbon fibre covers. I've also got to be careful with using a big sharp knife because I'm the only one here and the only one here for quite a distance, so, and that can drive. So if I'm going to end up going to hospital, today is not really the day. Let's try and the servo may be a lost cause. You see, I usually wrap stuff in masking tape, but there was a period of time where we were going through really crap masking tape and didn't want to trust the servo to this crap masking tape. And I've cut the wire. Can you see that in there? I've cut the wire. Great. Oh well. Bit of wire for the old soldering on stuff. So I'm going to keep them. In fact, if you look, that's actually been glued to the bit of carbon. So I've tried to glue that back in, and that's clearly not worked. Right. So I'll keep the bit of carbon. That's fine. Is there anything else that I want out of this bit of foam? The carbon tube that's not been glued in very well. There we go. Right, that can go in the bin. Bin, 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 bin. In terms of electronics wise, got a good old S800 decoder. Don't use them as much as we used to anymore. That's good. Let's see if we can get rid of this speed controller out of here. The question will be, what kind of speed controller is it? It is a... Is this the one that came out of... This was the one that came out of another model, I think, and I put it in here, possibly one of the Hobby King, either Tomahawk or Sidewinder, the flippy floppy Sidewinder. So we'll keep the S800 decoder, we'll keep this back. I'm probably not going to keep this speed control just because it's a bit random. What I mean by that is, you know, it's not like it's a known brand. It's Fly Colour, so I have heard of them, but it's not like a known brand to me. So I will cut off these backs. You know, it's amazing that I spend a lot of money on expensive backs like the Castle Creations one, and I have had a few fail. These cheap Energy ones have always been excellent. Never had a failure with them. We'll chuck that in the bin as is. Right, so then receiver wise, again, it's a receiver that the chance of me reusing is relatively small because we're sort of a few generations along now. So this is Easy UHF. If you've not seen this before, it was one of the sort of two original long range systems. You had this and Chain Link. This is Easy UHF. This basically just went quiet and died. I think you can still buy the receivers for it if you really wanted to. And to be honest with you, still a fantastically good system. Nothing wrong with it. And this is the problem with FPV. You know, if I look at my ordinary models, we've only really had one big receiver change, and that was from 35 megs to 2.4. You know, for a long time, you know, it's only the latest sort of 18 and 16 that come out from Futaba that don't support their original receivers. The very first 2.4 receivers that they brought out. That's one of the reasons why I haven't upgraded. One, I'd literally just bought my 16, whatever it is, SG or whatever it is I've got now. I'd literally only just bought that when the new generation came out. And also, a lot of our models still run the 617, 607, 606 even. And especially with how we are with flying at the minute, I don't really see the expense, because, you know, I don't trust the FHSS receivers. I had one in my RV8. It crashed that. You know, I'm sure people have all of their fleet full of them. I just don't trust it. You know, you have one, it's bad, it costs you a lot of money. You know, I've still not replaced it because of A, how much it costs, and B, trying to have the thing in stock of aerobatics. You know, it never again. You know, maybe if it was a cheap, crappy model, then yeah, but no. And then you've also, you know, even if it's a cheap, crappy model, it's still going to hurt someone if it wraps them around the head. So yeah, I'm sure you'll want to message me and say there's nothing wrong with them, and I'm sure there isn't. But it was very strange that, you know, back in the good old days, you had Futaba Fast and most of the others, and then you had DSM2, which chose 2 channels, and DSM2 had loads of issues and Futaba was fine. With the sort of second generation of that, well, maybe not quite second generation, but obviously they then had DSMX for Spectrum, which did the frequency hopping, so it was all over the place. So they've just been locked to 2 channels, and that seems to have fixed a lot of their issues. And then Futaba went and did what DSM2 did, because FHSS isn't, I believe, as much hopping as Fast. And yeah, never mind. And my understanding again is that the Texas Instruments chip that was used in the older Futaba stuff isn't made anymore. So that's why that's kind of come to an end. But yeah, I mean, as I say, fly, you know, for normal aircraft, you know, normal non-FPV planes, you know, it's kind of happened for a second time now, and the big one was the massive change from analog to digital. You know, the proper change. There were digital 35 meg systems, but you know, that was the big change. You know, so you know, in how long have I been flying for? 20 years. There's been 2 big changes, and you know, what was good is when 2.4 first came out, they made modules for the 35 meg radios. That's how a lot of us started. And you know, eventually the reason why we swapped fully to 2.4 was because we took off. Luckily, it was a kit built Watt 4 from Chris Foss, so it survived. But we took off of the aerial down by mistake. We didn't put a 35 meg aerial up, and yeah, it was a problem. And I used 35 megs for a lot longer than most people, because that was my first long range system. If you don't know, with 35 megs, you double the length, you double the range. So the 1 meter aerial that you had as standard, make that 2 meters, double the range. Make it 4 meters, double it again. Some people went as bad as having 8 meters of wire dangling out the bottom of their aircraft. It was fine. Obviously, no diversity, much more chance of getting interference, and you were basically limited to about 12 volts. So 3-cell batteries. If you went to 4-cell, you could start getting interference. The first plane I ever crashed was a Root Max Exclaim, and that glitched because of 4-cell. And I really missed that plane for a while. I remember I was about 10 probably. But yeah. And then you look at like FPV, and you know, I've had Easy UHF, the Turnigy 9 RX system, whatever it was, for a short while. Now I've got a Crossfire, and I actually love Crossfire. It's brilliant. It works exactly as I want it to. Kind of the same as Easy UHF, other than being a bit big. It worked fine. But everyone seems to be going to, is it Fast LRS or whatever it's called, which seems fine. But as someone who mostly flies fixed wing, it all seems a bit of an afterthought for us. Like the Channel 5, which I'm fairly sure until recently, or it might even still be the case somewhat, is basically an on and off channel. You know, it was designed for arming mini quads. You know, when it was first came out, it had 4 channels. It had, you know, your pitch, throttle, roll, yaw, again for your mini quad folks. You know, channel 4 for arming. Maybe had 5 channels and sorry, 6 channels, and you could also change flight modes. Although most people, you know, if you're racing, you just use manual and that's it really. You know, so that's changed again, and I'm like, well, I'm not changing it again because I don't like swapping modules in and out. So I buy a new radio. This is the other thing. You know, I still use what's it called? OpenTX, not EdgeTX, just because I haven't been bothered to change. EdgeTX, sorry, whatever it's called. OpenTX works fine for me. A lot of the iNav stuff, I don't really need to change from like iNav 4. But you're forced because the software, you know, if you want to change a setting, you have to either try and find an old piece of software to download or update it and then possibly cause a load of problems. Where, you know, you can still plug in very old iPods into iTunes, and I know it's very different. It's a multi-million-dollar company versus whatever, but yeah, it's not really on to me. That's just like the fact that should have been fixed by, you know, by version 4. The fact that is still an issue in 2025 is a bit insane. I really don't want to give up on these servos. They're expensive, but I might have to give up on this one. We'll see how we can go with it. But yeah, and then, like, you know, what I love about analog is the fact that the very first transmitter and receiver that I bought for 5.8, I could still use today with analog. You know, they'd be on a bit of a strange frequency and channel, but I could still use current transmitters and video receivers to pick up or be received on, vice versa. But then you've got Walksnail saying they're going to bring out a budget FPV system, and I'm like, well, that's fine. What happens if that ends up so popular that they drop the expensive one or drop Walksnail? You know, the gold standard does still seem to be DJI, but the trouble is DJI have already sort of dropped one system, and the trouble is if it wasn't for space and money, I would like to have lots of models. I don't want to be restricted on, oh, I can only really have 5, because if DJI decides to go, oh yeah, we don't support, you know, DJI 07 comes out and they go, oh, we're not supporting 04 anymore, sorry guys, you know, all your models have got that on. Either you've got to keep your old goggles specifically for them, so you're carrying around more kit and you can't sell them to put towards anything, and even if you did, they wouldn't be worth anything, it's old technology. You know, it's just a bit crappy, to say the least, and I don't fully trust Walksnail, and it's, again, I'm in this spot where I've got 2 Walksnail setups. You know, I've got the one that's on the Sky Surfer, you know, my sort of Bixler copy, and that's great, and I've got the one that is for this. And again, I'm kind of sat here like, do I go DJI, because it's supposedly better, and just, you know, prepare to maybe do whatever if another system comes out? Do I stick with Walksnail, although they seem to be breaking a lot of promises? You know, there's that open, ironically, the open FPV stuff that I had sat in a box for ages, designed to run on Raspberry Pis, that I've actually sold all the stuff for, and then needed Raspberry Pis, annoyingly, for another project, but never mind. Like all of that, now the likes of Cadex and people and RunCam are releasing like FPV grade stuff that runs on that. So I didn't even need the stuff in the plane, because it would need to have only been in bigger planes, because it would run a full-size Raspberry Pi. But no, they've actually made hobby grade hardware that I could have used the the Raspberry Pi on the ground to receive, and by all accounts it's not very good at the minute, but there's a chance of it growing. And this is the thing with Open LRS or whatever it's called. Am I going to save this server? I might be saving this server. With the new all single dancing LRS everyone seems to love at the minute, with it being open hardware, you can buy radio link receivers, eSheen receivers. If I want to buy a mini quad, I can't buy it seemingly with Crossfire and Walk Snail in it. They don't seem to exist. So, if I did ever want one, I'd have to build one, which I don't necessarily mind. I've built plenty of them to do it. But, it'd be nice to buy one that you know is going to work off the shelf and not spend ages tinkering with it. But yeah, that's sort of my rant for the day. It is FPV moves so fast, and it doesn't sort of keep the legacy up. I mean, there's so much stuff that keeps the legacy better than and again, it's open source, which you'd think, you'd think it'd be better, but not necessarily. Like Apple, for what you might not like about them, they do keep stuff supported for a long time. A lot longer than Android used to do. Android's new, we keep you updates for 6 years, only happened because that's why a lot of people started sticking with Android, with iPhone, because people were much more willing to, and we've had the same thing at work. We bought some Motorola's. They've only had 2 or 3 years of security updates. We've actually gone out and bought Samsungs because we can't afford iPhones, but they're Samsungs that promise 5 or 6 years of it, so we can have them a bit longer. Whereas, if it wasn't for Apple doing it, some people say, I might spend 400 quid on a phone instead of 200. But if it lasts twice as long because of software updates, it's fine. I've had the same thing, to go for a complete opposite tangent. I've had the same thing with shoes recently. I used to buy shoes that cost about £30. And they'd last 3 or 4 months, so I'd go through 3 or 4 in a year. Or 4 or 3, I guess, if you want to run it that way around. I bought some Nikes for £65. What a big spender, lots of money for me. But I finally sort of got rid of them a year later. So it actually works out, you've spent 60 quid up front, but you've spent that instead of spending 120. And, this is the same reason why I've kind of, not only because they get on with their iPads well, but I push my parents towards iPhones, because they don't really need anything all flashing or dancing, because they don't really do that much on there. But what it were really useful for is the fact that, they've had to spend 500 quid on a phone, or however much it was. They're going to keep it a damn sight longer than like my mum's Pixel 3a, that she wasn't able to listen to music in a car for ages, because Google stopped the updates, and Apple Music, Android Auto stopped working. And then she bought a car that didn't have a CD player in it. And I've just not been able to listen to music for like 2 years or a year and a half. So now she's got an iPhone, she finally can. Not sure if she is doing yet, but I can show her how to do that, and it will actually work, because she's got a 16E. So, but yeah, the idea of extending the life of stuff, to go back to what I was saying first, analog stuff. I've been doing FPV for over a decade easily at this point. And I could go back in time, get that first Easy Glider with 5.8 on, and I could use today's stuff, and vice versa. I could take the White Shark, and I could go and use that old receiver. Probably wouldn't be very good, and I'd have to change the channel around, but it would work and it would be fine. And again, I'm still using some of the original receivers I bought for 2.4 in planes today. Not the nicest planes I've got, again, because I did take into account their age and the fact that they are not officially supported. It's just because they run the same firmware as the 617s and 607s, that the 606s, which are the original ones, can still be used. And then, like, FPV stuff. It's alright if you're someone who only has 2 or 3 quads on a shelf. You know, you've got your 3 sizes of quads, they fly how you like, away you go. But there's so much different variety and stuff, you know, you can have them and then some planes and then some other stuff, and you'll just be kind of looked out on it. And the trouble is as well, with so much of it being online, you'll ask a question, you know, I could ask a question now, you know, oh, hi guys, I'm trying to install, you know, my TBS Crossfire radio, or I'm trying to install my Easy UHF. That would be an even better one. I'm trying to install my Easy UHF onto this iNav build. Any idea how I do X, Y, and Z? And then they just laugh at you out the door. You know, and it's almost getting that way with Crossfire, and it's like, well, still being sold, still being updated. I don't necessarily trust TBS, but come on, I'm trying to get to this Allen key so I can take this a bit more apart. Is that going to come off, or is that being glued, do you reckon? We'll find out very shortly. One thing that was good with these S800s is that they came with these, or they didn't come with, you had to buy them, but they were like an add-on part that spaced the motor away from the back of the wing. And what was great about that was the fact that, oh yeah, I'm not getting this off, fine, I'll take the spacers and leave it at that. What's good about that is that because the prop isn't sort of flopping past the back of the wing, it's a hell of a lot less noisy, and it's also more efficient because, you know, you've not got the prop fighting against the air that builds up between the back of the wing and itself as it spins. So yes, just winding down, just trying to get the standoffs off of this without cutting my hand, which is health and safety. Don't look at what I'm doing right now. But yeah, I'm sorry that this channel sort of gets forgotten about even from time to time. I can only really do stuff when I can sort of be on my own and be my own thoughts and make sure I'm doing things as I should. You know, I'm not having to keep an ear out, which would be funny at the minute because one of my ears don't bloody work with this ear problem. You know, for people coming, because we're just off the kitchen, so you know, the bin is basically outside this door. So anyone, you know, cooking or something and has a packet to put out here, yep, they're annoying me. And I can't really say, can you stop, you know, living in your house? So I can make dumb YouTube videos. That's not how it works. And apologies as well if the sound is not up to the last few videos as quality. This was a bit of a short notice idea. When I got down here, it turns out that my lovely Rode microphones were flat. So all the transmitter section of it was flat. So yes, that's why you... Oh fuck it, I give up on that one. That's why you've had iPhone for this video. But yeah, that's going to be it. Loads of black foam now all over the floor. So the S800 is dead. It's now in pieces in my bin. A good model of its day. I think if you wanted to buy one now, you'd probably better look at the AR wing. That's more sort of up to date. That's that gone. We've made decisions on what we're doing with the T1 Ranger VTOL. I'm going to order those parts now as soon as this phone's finished doing its recording duties. We'll chuck some of this in the bin. Let's say if I get it first class, it will ship tomorrow. We're here Thursday. It can go through the letterbox if I'm not here. Oh, excuse me, and we'll be all fine and dandy. But yeah, until then, thank you for watching. Hopefully the gap won't be quite as long for the next one. And I'll see you then. Bye bye.